Here is a Telefunken TC 450 HighCom. This is very similar to the TC 400 that I repaired a while ago, except this one has Telefunken's own HighCom noise reduction. And in case you wonder, it also has this, a Dolby B expander for playback of pre-recorded cassettes. Now, this has the same primary problem that the TC 400 Hi-Fi had, a dirty record play switch. When I first tried this off camera, there was no signal whatsoever. No signal on playback, no signal on record. So what I did was this. I operated the record play switch a bunch of times, and after that I could record, but the playback amplifier was oscillating. There was this sort of motorboating sound. So I operated the record play switch again a bunch of times, and now the cassette deck actually does kind of work. This is a recording that I made earlier. And I guess we'll all agree, this sounds very good. There is nothing wrong with this cassette deck aside from the record play switch. You may have noticed the left channel kept fading in and out, so there still was an intermittent contact problem in the record play switch when I made that test recording. So I am going to do exactly what I did in the TC 400 Hi-Fi. I'm going to clean the record play switch, except this time I'm going to do it differently. Now, in the TC 400, I used this. This is the contact cleaner that I always use, Kontaktchemie Tuner 600. I've never had any problems with it, except that time in the TC 400, it was not a lasting repair. When I went back and tried the cassette deck again a couple of weeks later, the record play switch was bad again. So I came back with something stronger, this stuff. And this is what we're going to use in this cassette deck right from the start. This is Kontaktchemie Kontakt 60. This is a much stronger cleaner than Tuner 600, and that means when you use it, you have to know what you're doing. When using Kontakt 60 in switches, the big difference between this and the Tuner 600 is that this does not evaporate fully. It leaves behind a residue, and the residue is what eats away the corrosion. The problem is, when the corrosion is gone, the residue won't stop eating. No, it'll start eating the contacts, and at that point, it will actually start causing damage. So you can see I have put a label on this can to remind me, when you use this stuff, you must wash it out with either Kontakt WL or isopropyl alcohol afterwards. You have to thoroughly flood the switch with isopropyl alcohol to get rid of this residue, wash it away, and then it'll all be fine. As proven by the TC 400, after using Kontakt 60 in its record play switch, the deck kept on working for weeks after the repair, and it has now been sold. Here is the inside of the TC 450. This is very similar to the TC 400. We have the same strangely shaped back panel, and all the modules look almost the same. We also have the German language stickers on every module, like down there. So I do think that these cassette decks were assembled in Germany. However, all the modules were made in Japan. In the comments of the video on the TC400, somebody said that these modules were made by Funai, and I guess that is very well possible, and if that's the case, I really have to say, well done, Funai, because everything still works, including this mechanism. Over here are the plug-in cards for the HighCom noise reduction system. Each one contains a big HighCom IC, and if you look closely you can see this card in the front says 04, this card says 03. This cassette deck actually contains two different revisions of HighCom cards, and you can tell because each card has different components tacked across the HighCom ICs. Now, that is apparently normal. It did take Telefunken quite a while to get their HighCom ICs right, and in the meantime, they had to tack all kinds of components across the IC depending on which generation of IC it was. To clean the record play switches, as you can see there is two of them, I now have the cassette deck sitting upright on its side. So I can spray the contact 60 in up here. It's then going to run down through the switches, and it's going to drip out down here where it will be caught by this kitchen towel. This way, I can hopefully avoid getting contact 60 all over the circuit board, because remember, anything that gets contact 60 on it then needs to be washed with contact WL or isopropyl alcohol. And that's dripping out at the bottom. Okay, that is more than enough, and I can already see that my plan of not getting it all onto the circuit board did not work out at all, because it seems like the record play switches are not sealed at the bottom towards the board. But as you can see, I'm now working them, and I'm not sure how well this comes across on camera, but the stuff that's dripping out is kind of red. Let's double check. Let's just... Okay, well, seems like the spray itself is red. That's interesting. But anyway, I will keep working the switch, and then I'll be back. As you can see, the excess spray that dripped out of the switches and into the kitchen towel is kind of brown. So the spray is definitely dissolving something. Of course, I don't know if it's the corrosion, but I certainly hope so. The kitchen towel has been replaced. The spray has now been in the switch for a total of about 10 minutes. That should not have harmed anything. And now comes the cleaning. I will use contact WL just because I happen to have a can of it, But as I've said, you can also use isopropyl alcohol for this. And it seems my can has lost all of its pressure. Let's make sure we also wash all the things that got the Contact 60 all over it that weren't supposed to get any of it on it. It turns out Contact WL was a bad idea, and I even took the cassette deck down to the air compressor to blow out any excess Contact WL. Still, when I went to test the cassette deck, the playback amplifier was oscillating. It would only put out a beep tone, and it would not stop. So I had to go back and do it all again with isopropyl alcohol, and thankfully that did the trick. Here is another test recording that I just made. It still sounds really good, and there are no more contact problems. I also went through and cleaned the switches and potentiometers using Tuner 600. I just cleaned off some chemicals that had leaked through to the underside of the circuit board, and it looks like this voltage regulator got resoldered at some point. The front of the cassette deck has been disassembled for cleaning. And here is the tape path. Let's bring up the heads by pressing play and pause, and bring in the cotton swab soaked in isopropyl alcohol to clean those heads. Like so. I may have to come back and do this a second time, because I'm giving you the best view, not me. That's not ideal. But as you can see, oh, that is worthwhile. As you can see, we're getting quite a bit of dirt off those heads. And yeah, as I've said, I'll return to this once the camera is off. And another cotton swab for the capstan. Oh yes, quite a bit of dirt on that one as well. As you can see. Now, as you can also see, the pinch roller is kind of shiny. It's not totally horrible. So I'm not going to use any sandpaper this time. Instead, what I want to try, and this is very much an experiment, is lighter fluid. I used to use lighter fluid for cleaning heads back before I had any isopropyl alcohol available, and I do remember when I tried cleaning the pinch roller with the lighter fluid, that always seemed to take off quite a lot of material. So let's see what it does in this case. Let's see if this is going to work or if this turns out to be a terrible idea. Apparently all of the roller cleaners, the rubber roller cleaners that you can get for printers contain a lot of the same chemicals as lighter fluid. That's why I had this idea. But, well, it's definitely taking off dirt. It's taking off plenty of dirt. Let's come back with the other side of the Q-tip. Well, I will have to say the lighter fluid is not having nearly as much of an effect as I remember it having years ago. It doesn't really seem to do much of anything. Well, yeah, it's taking off a little bit of rubber. You can see how the dirt is starting to turn black. But actually, let's... well, I mean, the pinch roller does have plenty of grip if I feel it now, so... well, I guess it did do something. With the camera out of the way, I finished cleaning the heads, and I have to say, I think cleaning the pinch roller with lighter fluid was not entirely a bad idea. You can still see traces of where the tape runs, but the shininess is gone and the rubber is very grippy, so I think lighter fluid is a good option if you don't want to use the sandpaper. And this is what the cassette checker thinks about the Telefunken cassette deck. As you can see, the speed is very much on the high side, but I can see that someone in the past has already poked a screwdriver through the back of the motor, so that must have been their doing. So let's see if I can correct that. Like so. That's good enough. Let's check the wow and flutter. This cassette deck was rated by Telefunken to do 0.18% wow and flutter, measured according to DIN. At least I think that's what it is. Unfortunately, Telefunken's specifications are not very clear, but as you can see, it does add up. We are hovering right around 0.18%, so I think that's okay. I should also mention, in the video about the Telefunken TC 400, I said that it was rated to do 0.14%. That does not make sense, and looking at the specifications once again, I think that should be 0.2%. And here it is, cleaned and put back together, the Telefunken TC 450 HighCom. This is a 1979 model, and these were not on the market for long when Telefunken replaced them with the model TC 450M, which added support for metal tape as well as an automatic tape selector for ferro and chrome in 1980. Let's now listen to the final test recording I've made for this video. Thank you for watching.